Hello everyone. We continue with our exposition of the book of Revelation with chapter 17. This chapter and the next are all about the fall of the so-called Babylon. We've read about that already in the chapters 14 verse 8 and in chapter 16 verse 19. But now we get more details. Babylon is a name that is mentioned many times in scripture. About 287 times, and it does not always refer to the same, although it's always bad. We find it in Genesis 11 as the great city and the location for the construction of the Tower of Babel, symbol of man's defiance against God and the cause for the confounding of the languages. Much later, Babylon was the capital of the Babylonian Empire that attacked and conquered Israel. Think among other things of the Babylonian captivity. So the actual place, Babel or Babil, still exists in today's Iraq, just south of Baghdad. It doesn't have that anti-God, antichrist connotation anymore. Even in John's days, at the time he wrote the book of Revelation, it had already shifted to Rome. That was the Babylon of his days. Babylon stands for the Antichrist system in the last days, and we can already see it clearly. It is known as the New World Order, and it will be at its height during the tribulation period. And that is also when it will collapse completely. And that is what we read about here in chapters 17 and 18. To understand the scenario described here, we must understand the way in which this New World Order is organized. It is structured around three pillars: religion, economy and government. We have already identified that in chapter 13. See the video about that. We've seen there that it spoke about the first beast and the governmental system, the second beast and the religious system, and then the image, mark and number of the beast and the financial system. Through these pillars, there will be total control over mankind. It is the supreme form of totalitarian government. Religion and economy are tools used to make people conform freely. And all three pillars are an integral part of the New World Order, or in biblical terms, Babylon. In reading the chapters 17 and 18, we will see that Babylon interchangeably refers to either pillar to the system as a whole. We go to Revelation 17, the first two verses. It reads there, "And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will shew unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication." We read in the previous chapter at the seventh bowl that Babylon fell, and as I explained, this is further detailed here. This is now made clear further by mentioning one of the angels which had the bowls. This is all part of the bowl judgments, the seventh bowl in particular. The text leaves no doubt there will be judgment. Babylon is described here as the great whore, or harlot, and that is someone who takes advantage of the lusts of others. So the beast system takes advantage of the lust for money and power of the leaders, here called the kings of all the world. It says he sits on many waters. As we have seen in chapter 13, that refers to people. It applies to many waters, many nations, even the inhabitants of the earth. And there is an irony in the so-called one world order. It poses to be one world, to be unified, but as the prophet Daniel describes, it doesn't cleave. It's based on fornication, intercourse between parties that do not belong together. We continue in verse 3. "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon, the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. John is carried away in the Spirit. He is given a vision. He still refers to the angel mentioned in verse 1. He is carried into the wilderness. In the Bible, wilderness is always referring to the world, the place that rejects God. This is where the woman resides. God's children have always been in the world, but never of the world. They have been the salt of the world, but now they are removed. It has now become a wilderness without restraints. And I would refer for that to 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 6 and 7. In chapter 12 we read that the remnant of that other woman, representing Israel, was also brought into the wilderness. But not just like that. She is in a special, safe place that has been prepared for her. Notice here that John also speaks about a woman as opposed to the harlot. He sees the woman after he is carried away in the Spirit, but he saw the harlot before that. And it is often explained that these two are one and the same, but the text seems to imply otherwise. I would suggest to you that the harlot represents the whole of the beast system, or New World Order, whereas the woman, as per usual in Scripture, represents a church or a church system, or in other cases a nation, like in chapter 12. The woman here represents the false religion of the New World Order. With that in mind, we are able to understand the rest of this description. She rides a beast. That points to two things: power and control. Think of it this way: when someone rides a horse, he is in control of the horse and determines where it goes. At the same time, the horse gives power and speed to the rider. Likewise, this religious system is supported by the political power of the New World Order, and at the same time she seems to control the beast. As mentioned before, she is used to make people comply. We read here that both the beast as well as the clothing of the woman are red, scarlet. In Revelation 12 verse 3 we read that the dragon was red. And then in Revelation 13 verse 3 we read that the dragon gives his power to the beast that rises out of the sea, also known as the Antichrist. He is pulling the strings of this religious system behind the scenes, and the color red reveals his allegiance with the dragon, the devil. And that is made even more clear from the beast being full of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. This is the exact same description that we find in chapter 13, verse 1. No doubt that the woman, the religious system, is fully supported by the Antichrist, although to the world she is led by the false prophet. Of the woman, 2 colors are given, scarlet and purple. These colors signify luxury and royalty. They have traditionally been the most costly colors to produce, and were throughout history typically worn by religious and governmental leaders. And even to this day they are the prevailing colors in the higher echelons of the Catholic hierarchical structure. The fact that she's arrayed with precious stones and gold, even has a golden cup, emphasizes the wealth of this religious system. In spite of all the shine and gold, her cup is filled with abominations and filthiness of her fornication. As in verse 2 we see that the fornication as the intermingling of political powers into one. It's the iron and the clay. We see it here as a mixing of religions into a new one. And as it continues to say, she is like a prostitute, going with every religion. Note that this is even written on her forehead. This was a practice in Rome in particular. The prostitutes would wear a headband with their name written on it. Thus it does not only point to what she is, but also to the place from where this New World religion originates, and where the aforementioned colors are most prevalent. It comes then perfectly together with the political system that is revived Roman Empire, the iron. She is then called the mother of harlots. From all idolatry, abominations and adultery, the harlots, she is the source, the mother. But she has far surpassed herself, the climax of ecumenism. She drank the blood of the saints, clearly implying that she is not a saint herself at all. She took advantage of the saints and persecuted them and turned them into martyrs of Jesus, so much so that it made her drunk. Mad, intoxicated with her own idolatrous agenda. She is filled with the sick joy of drunkenness for the death of the saints. Jeremiah warns against the spirit of Babylon and the drunkenness that she brings. He writes in Jeremiah 51 verses 6 and 7, "Flee out of the midst of Babylon, and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hands, that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad." John witnesses this abominable whore and is filled with amazement and great admiration. This was unknown to him, a false religion persecuting the true religion, false ministers of Christ reveling in the suffering and death of those who truly love Yeshua. From our perspective, it's unfortunately all too familiar. How many Christians have been slaughtered in the arenas by wild animals and gladiators, killed in religious genocides, burned at the stake. And once more this horror will peak during the 7-year tribulation period. It is clear, we can see it growing and intensifying today. Even now, Christian persecution is worse than ever. The statistics don't lie. It is just as Jesus had foretold in Matthew 24 verse 9. "Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." See our study of Matthew 24 for more details on this subject. We go to verse 7 of Revelation 17. It reads there, "And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carried her, which had the 7 heads and 10 horns." It begins here with a rhetorical question from the angel to John. Why do you marvel? It needs to be clarified, and so the answer follows immediately. I will tell thee. The angel is going to explain 2 things, the woman and the beast on which she rides. Remember, the woman is the false religion, the beast is the political system, a new world order on which she thrives. Both have the spirit of harlotry, but it is the beast that carries the woman, not the other way around. The focus is on the beast first. We are reminded once again that the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. This identifies her to be the same as mentioned in chapter 13, verse 1. And we have given an explanation of this mystery already there, and even referred to this chapter here. So we already have an explanation on the sea, the beast, and its twofold nature, the system and the person of the Antichrist. The 7 heads and the 10 horns. Here we will get some additional clues. Verse 8. "The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, yet is." A most enigmatic verse of which numerous interpretations can be found. The first question we can ask ourselves is, what is meant by the beast? Is it still the same, the political power? We must assume so, since the angel is explaining to John what it was that he just saw. However, some confusion is added because it mentions "and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit." That is what we also found in chapter 13, verse 11. And as we saw there, it refers both to the false religious system as well as to its leader, the false prophet. The religious system was the woman, not the beast that she rides. And we can see that all identify one with the other. They share the same spirit of Babylon. From the explanation in chapter 13 we have learned that what we now call the New World Order, the Beast Empire, is nothing more than a restored or revived Roman Empire. In chapter 13 verse 2 John makes the connection with the vision of Daniel through the leopard, the bear and the lion. The leopard representing the Roman Empire of John's days, the empire that now, at the fulfillment of this prophecy, has passed, that was and is not. Daniel identifies it with iron in his vision of the statue. During that empire, the Roman Catholic Church thrived. The woman was already riding the precursor of the beast. Persecution of Christians and Jews peaked. In its revived form, it tries to join all the nations and all the religions together. That is the fornication of which we read before. It's an intermingling of systems that do not cleave. Daniel describes it as the 10 toes of the statue, iron and clay. The last attempt to establish a 1,000-year kingdom before the statue crumbles. It tries to be, but is not. It shall go into perdition. In agreement with chapter 14, all the inhabitants of the earth whose names are not written in the book of life will marvel and worship the beast, its number and its name. Verse 9. Here is the mind which had wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Here we see the power of this prophecy. It is compound in meaning and explanation. As we said, it refers to the beast in all its fullness. The religious system, the political system and its leaders. We've already made a link between the 7 heads and the 7 continents, showing that it is a global system. The 10 crowns on the heads prove that it is divided into 10 regions. But now we get another explanation showing that the 7 heads are 7 hills. This seems to point to a location where the woman, the religious institute, resides. There are a few places that are identified with 7 hills. The first and foremost is Rome. That makes perfect sense with all that we have seen so far. It is the headquarters of the Vatican and the capital of the Roman Empire. However, if we look at all end times Bible prophecy, there is nothing that points to Rome. But everything points to Jerusalem. And that is our next candidate of cities on 7 hills. It seems that the main seat of the new global religion will not be in Rome, but in Jerusalem. So we see how both the original Roman Empire, the precursor of the New World Order, as well as the revived Roman Empire, will be ruled from a city on 7 mountains. There are some other places that are on 7 hills, or allegedly on 7 hills, but this seems to match all that we understand from the prophecy so far. We move on to verse 10. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue for a short space. We look back once more to the image that we presented in chapter 13. Look at the situation when this prophecy was penned down. 5 kings are fallen: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Greece. 1 is the Roman, and is to come, the revived Roman Empire. And indeed, when it comes, it will only last a short period of time. Actually, basically 3.5 years. But it must come, since it is part of God's judgment. Verse 11 then reads, And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. If 5 kings are fallen, and one is to come, then the latter is the 7th. So how can this leader be the eighth? The prophet Daniel gives the answer. In Daniel 7, verse 24 and 25 it reads, "Out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws." So, when the revived Roman Empire, the 10 kings, is more or less formed, another leader will arise and get rid of 3 of the 7 kings. 3 of the 10 kings, I should say, leaving 7. He himself will then be the 8th, trying to establish his own empire. This will be the Antichrist, using Satan's authority to rise. But it will be short-lived, and he will go into perdition or destruction. We continue to read in verses 12 and 13. "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as of yet, but receive their power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." The 10 regions that form the confederation of the New World Order are not traditional kingdoms. They are manufactured. They are created and ally with the Antichrist leader. The expression 1 hour means it will only last for a short time. The whole objective for all of this is, from Satan's perspective, to destroy Yeshua at his second coming and exalt himself as God. That is why he sent out the unclean spirits, as we read in Revelation 16 verses 13 and 14, to gather the armies of the world. But we know already how that is going to end. We will get into that in chapter 19. But also Daniel foretold it when he wrote about the destruction of the statue by the rock that crushed the feet, in Daniel chapter 2 verses 44 and 45. Here the end of the New World Order is again stated here in Revelation 17 in verse 14, where it reads, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful." Finally, we get an explanation of the meaning of the waters. We already explained that, but notice once more it speaks about peoples, that are national groups, nations, these are ethnic groups, and tongues or languages, expressing the global nature. Verse 15 reads, "And he said unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." Then the final portion of this chapter, there we see how there comes a moment of judgment against the global religion of the New World Order, as was announced in the first verse of this chapter. Verse 16, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of the Lord shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth." God turns the governmental pillar against the religious pillar. Although the New World Order has utilized the one world religion to make people comply and conform, and the religion in turn thrived on the politics, the woman riding the beast, now that the Antichrist has fully risen to power, he does not need this religion anymore. And we recognize the megalomaniac character of the devil, as Paul is also showing in 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 3 and 4. The beast turns on itself in order to bring about God's wrath. Doesn't that remind you of what happened to the Midianites in Gideon's time and the Philistines in Paul's time? In Judges 7 verse 22 it says, "And the 300 blew the trumpets, and the Lord set every man sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host." And in 1 Samuel 14 verse 20, And Saul and all the people that were with him assembled themselves, and they came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was a very great discomfiture. And so religious Babylon comes to an end. In the final statement we get an extra confirmation of that great city which controls the kings of the earth, referring to Rome.